Good morning, everyone. We are back now testing the Monolith M570 versus the Sendy Aiva. And it's about time that we started this comparison, I know. We're going to do the bass comparison today, then afterwards, in a couple of days, we'll do the mids, and then after that, we'll do the treble, and then we will talk about a conclusion. Now, a lot of people have been saying, or thinking, that the M570 is a half-price Sendy Aiva, and we're going to find out if that is actually true sonically. Build-wise, it's not the case at all. I think that the M570 is a very uncomfortable headphone to wear for long periods of time if you're the type of person that cannot handle weight. So if you're the type of person that says, look, I can never wear an audeze headphone because of their bulk and their weight, then the M570 is not for you. If you're the type of person that says that ear pads need to be absolutely plush and comfortable, then the M570 standard ear pads are not for you. If you're the type that says, I need a very nicely balanced headband, a suspension headband, for example, then the M570 is not for you. So the M570 by size and weight is night and day different from the Sendy Aiva. I've had the Aiva for over a year, and I think it's one of the most comfortable headphones I've ever worn, and I love listening to them for that reason, as a major reason. Because if you're not comfortable with a pair of headphones, just like you're not comfortable with a pair of shoes, you're not going to wear them, you're not going to wear the shoes, and you're not going to listen to the headphone. The M570 for me is, more than an hour becomes very uncomfortable because of that weight and the pressure from the headband. So if you're the type of person who's like, I got to choose, but I want to know which one's more comfortable, I think it's safe to say that the Sendy Aiva is demonstrably much lighter and much more comfortable, at least in my opinion. All right, so let's get started with the actual sound test. Here's how we've got it all set up. I've got both headphones plugged into an AB switch, which is itself plugged into the Army ADI2 DAC. And we're going to stream music from Amazon Music HD. So we're going to get HD music or Ultra HD, depending on whichever track that we particularly have here. When we've got 3 tracks ready, we've got Pure Water, Post Malone, and Moons by MV. Now, all of this stuff is available on my Spotify playlist, so if you don't have Amazon HD, that's fine. Go ahead and click on my Spotify playlist link in the description below, and it'll have all these songs there that you can use if you want to. All right, so let's get started. I've got the Sendy Aiva on my head, absolutely the more comfortable of the two headphones. I'm still using the standard pad from the Sendy Aiva. We're going to go to Pure Water, We're going to Pure Water first, and currently the volume for the RME is at negative 45 decibels. Here we go. And at negative 45 decibels, I can hear the music. I can hear the vocals, but it's pretty muted. So let's increase. And I'm going to increase, so let's say negative 35. Negative 35 is where I think most people will listen to this song. If you're sitting on your computer with the headphones on, working, reading a book, whatever, this is probably the maximum volume you would listen to. The bass response is very fast but light. So it's a very, very bass light headphone. There's no rumble, there's no thumping effect. The vocals come out crystal clear. And there's this, I wouldn't say it's sparkliness, but there's a certain amount of clarity that the Sendy Aiva brings to vocals that is unique, I think, to headphones. I've heard it in one IEM, and I will talk about that at the very end of the series, but for as far as the Sendy Aiva is concerned, it's a very unique sound signature where the mids really do stand out in a very precise and clear manner. The bass is not interacting with the mids. There's no muddiness, there's no harshness, there's no distortion at all, but also the bass is very light. I'm going to increase from negative 35 to negative 30. Okay, so at negative 30, the response hasn't changed. So with some headphones, if you go from a low volume to a high volume, you'll notice when you put in more power, that the drivers start responding a little differently. There are some headphones that have a very laid-back response early on, and then when you put more power to the drivers, they tighten up and they give you much more precise reproduction. The Aiva is not like that. It's very linear. It doesn't change the sound character from -45 to -30. It sounds about the same. The only difference, obviously, is the volume. And even at -30 decibels, I can't hear that rumble. I'm looking at the RME, and I can tell from the graph that we've got plenty of volume at -20 decibels. -20 -20 hertz, 40 hertz, 50 hertz, and I'm not really hearing any of that on the Aiva. I'm hearing the 100 hertz, 150 hertz, I can hear that, but anything below 100, it's really hard to pick up because the Aiva is really not emphasizing it. Okay, so let's put the Aiva aside. Let's put on the M570, and on the M570, we're using the stock pads here, and I don't think that the stock pads on the M570 sit as well as the Sendy Aivas. The Sendy Aivas pads are, I think, most people who talk about the Aiva pads are very happy with them because just the plushness and the fact that they're angled in a perfect way, they tend to sit really well on people's heads. And Monolith didn't copy the pads, unfortunately. Instead, they have this this perforated leather pad that is angled, but I don't think it's angled like the Sendy Aiva. And so there's a bit of a gap on the back of my ear that the M570 retains that the Aiva, I think, pretty much seals off. And that kind of contributes to, one, the comfort, and two, the isolation around your ear. Okay, so let's get started. Let's start all over again, and we're gonna go back to -45 decibels here on the RME. I'm ready, and here we go. -45 decibels sounds about the same volume as it did on the Aiva, so I don't hear any difference there. Very muted, so I'm going to increase to -40. I don't hear any audible difference so far. Let's increase again to -35. Maybe there's a slight bit more emphasis in the sub bass, but it's really hard to tell. Let's increase again to -30. Okay, we're at -30. The mids, I would say, sound not quite the same. There seems to be a spike there somewhere. It's a little bit of grain in the 570 that the Sendy Aiva doesn't have. It's just a tiny bit of harshness in the 570. In comparison, I'm not saying that the 570 is a harsh sounding headphone. It's just in comparison, it sounds like the mids on this song is a little bit harsher, and there's a peak somewhere there, and I can't figure out where it is. Whereas in the Aiva, it's a very clean, clear response, no harshness. I really don't hear the 20 hertz, 30, 40, 50 hertz. I don't hear that, just like with the Aiva. Now there's this portion that goes boom, 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 boom. It's very light, very, very muted, and it was, I think, about the same on the Aiva. Okay, we're going to stop. We're going to switch back to the Aiva real quick. Okay, I've got the Aiva, and let's keep playing here. Yeah, that bass sounds exactly the same to me. I'm going to stop. I'm going to switch back to the M570. And let's play again. Yeah, so the bass is exactly the same as far as I can tell. There's no meaningful difference between the two with the bass response. Now, when I was going back and forth, I again noticed that there is a slight bit of harshness in the mids on the 570 compared to the Aiva. again, that's not to say that the 570 is a harsh sounding headphone. It's just that there's a spike there somewhere, and I can't really figure out where it is, because with that tiny bit of a spike, the mids, the vocals on this song, what happens is it becomes almost like ear piercing just a little bit, not because it's sibilant, it's not because there's distortion, there isn't. It's just a noticeable difference between the Aiva and the 570, where there's some portion of that frequency response that's got this little bump, and you can hear the vocals a little bit more sharply on the 570 than you can on the Aiva. Now that may come down to your personal preference and say you like that. I don't know. That's up to you. And the difference really is of very minor degrees. And you will, unless you're doing an A/B test, you won't probably notice that there's a difference. If you put on the 570 today and then in a week you put on the Aiva, it's not like you're going to notice the difference. It's when you do the A/B test that you actually start picking up these little nuances here. All right, so let's go to Post Malone. We've got the Aiva back on my head. And let's start with Post Malone. Here we go. Oh, you know what? Let's go back to negative 45 decibels first. Okay, we're at negative 45. Here we go. Okay, negative 45 is, I wouldn't say it's muted. It's a little bit louder than negative 45 was on Pure Water. I'm going to increase to negative 40. And I think negative 40 is probably the volume that most people would just sit on their couch, listen to the headphones, working on their computer or whatever. Let's increase again to negative 35. Negative 35 produces very clear vocals. I could hear the piano. And again, the vocals sound very unique in the Aiva type drivers, where the vocals just stand out. And there's this clarity and there's this sparkliness to the vocals. It's not ear piercing. It doesn't become harsh. It's just that the vocals stand out ahead of everything. And it's almost like there's a wall around the vocals that the other frequencies simply can't meld with, and preventing that melding. And that's the way I'm hearing it. The bass is present, but it's not particularly present. I hear the drum, but it's not a thumping drum. It's a very, very fast bass response, and I'm not hearing anything below 100 hertz, to be honest. If it's there, then I may have to increase the volume. So let's do that. Let's increase the volume from negative 35 to negative 30. We're at negative 30. Yeah, and even with negative 30, fairly loud, I can't really hear the bass. So this is not a bass headphone. That being said, there's excellent separation between the bass and the mids. And when the bass is playing like now, you can hear it. It's just very fast, and it doesn't interact with the other frequencies. Okay. So now let us switch to the M570. I'm going to take all the way back, and we're going to bring this back down to negative 45 decibels. Here we go, and here we go with the 570. Yep, volume sounds about the same. I'm going to increase to negative 40. Again, it sounds the same as with the Aiva. Increase to negative 35. Ooh, yeah, there's a tiny bit of graininess on the 570 that is not present on the Aiva. And it makes this vocalist's voice sound just a tiny bit harsher on the 570 than it did on the Aiva. The Aiva has, by comparison, a slightly smoother response. And, with some vocalists, this can sound really harsh, I'm sure, like with Charlie XCX, Dreamer. I'm sure that's going to be pretty awful to listen to. Let's increase to negative 30. Yeah, there's definitely, for this song, with this particular type of vocalist, where there's supposed to be a little bit of air in her voice, You could hear you can hear a bit more of that harshness on the 570 in this song than you could in Pure Water, but it's definitely there. And when you compare to the Aiva has a smoother response, and one that I think allows for an easier listening experience. If you're the type that can't handle harshness, if you're the type that does not like, like for example, treble response, then I think that the 570's representation of the mids so far is not going to be flattering. It's just a bit of bump there in one or some. I got to figure out what it is. I'm going to have to look at some frequency graphs and figure out where that bump is, but it really is adding a bit of sparkliness or harshness that I don't think in songs like this present well. Let's keep playing. The bass response is exactly the same as far as I can tell. Yeah, there's no difference between the bass. Okay. So the bass response so far has been the same. It's just that mids that's been giving us a little bit of trouble there. Okay, so now let's go to Moons by MB, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on Moons. I'm just going to start playing, and I'm going to skip to midway, because there's, in the middle of the song, there's this boom, 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 boom. There's just kind of a rolling drum effect here, and I just want to listen to that. So let's start playing. I have the Aiva on my head, and I'm going to leave the volume at -30. So let's skip to halfway. And I've skipped to 1 minute and 50 seconds, so I'm just going to listen. You can hear the different elements in this song very clearly on the Aiva. And in just a few moments, we should be able to find out how that bass response with the bum 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 bum, the rolling thunder, rolling drum effect occurs. And that should happen in a few moments here. In the background, you can still hear the drums, but it's very light. Like, you notice it's a drum, it just doesn't have any real impact. And here we go. Yeah, so it goes dun 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 dun. So let's go back to 2 minutes and 35 seconds or so. And let's listen to that little effect again. Yeah, so it goes boom, ba bum, boom, bum, ba bum. And that's kind of like a subwoofer type effect, boom, like that. It's supposed to resonate. The Aiva does not resonate. You can hear it. It's simply not, it doesn't have any body. And it's not interacting with anything else. So you hear the sound, you hear that sub-bass rumble effect sort of thing, but it lingers very, very shortly. It just hits and it moves on, hits and it moves on. So there's no melding, there's no muddiness, there's no distortion, there's no harshness, there's none of that stuff, but there's also no real bass impact throughout any of these songs, and especially here at 2 minutes and 35 seconds of Moons. Okay, so let's switch to the 570. And I'm going to take it back a little bit more than 235. Let's take it to about 2 minutes and 25 seconds or so. All right, here we go. I haven't changed the volume. It's still at -30. And here we go. Strange. Maybe that boom boom boom, that subwoofer type effect has a slight bit more emphasis on the 570. Let's try again. Okay, so let's go back, and I'm going to switch back to the Aiva. And here we go. Nope, it's exactly the same. Exactly the same bass response. My imagination. Okay, so here we go. Look, let's talk about conclusions. For the bass, I think both headphones sound the same. I can't find any distinguishing marks between them. Now, maybe somebody can sit there and go, you know, I hear a slight difference here or there, but maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. But for my test, I don't hear any distinguishing differences between the 570 and the Aiva for bass. But what did jump out, and I think is going to continue to jump out in our future tests, is that mids, and the 570 simply has a bit more harshness to it than the Aiva does. Now, there are plenty of people who don't like the Aiva. There are plenty of people who say, look, I can't handle that mids response, and I don't like the fact that it has such a light bass response. And that all comes down to preference. I think that if you're looking at bass alone, if you're looking for something that has, I hate to use the word natural, but natural bass response, if you're looking for something that sounds like a typical headphone for bass, then neither of these is going to satisfy you. You're talking about Beats and Bose and some Sonys, and yeah, that's not these headphones. So if you're the type of person that likes your bass response, you sit there and you crank up these types of songs and you love the thumping effect, these are not going to do it for you. But if you're the type that says, look, I'm not a fan of strong bass response. I want to listen to music for the mids and I want to be able to cut down some of that bass, then these two headphones really do provide that. They do it in such a way that it doesn't become muddy, it doesn't distort, it doesn't become harsh. Of course, there's the 570 issue with the slight bump we'll get to in the next video. And if you just want to focus on the mids, then yeah, the drivers in these two headphones really do perform that way, that they do emphasize the mids and de-emphasize the bass. So this is not a neutral sounding headphone. And you need to, anybody who says that the Aiva is a neutral sounding headphone, maybe they should listen to a true neutral headphone and then do a comparison. Because the way that the bass is responded to the Aiva and the 570 is not neutral, it's instead rolled off. So there's a bass roll off there that some might find pleasing, some might find annoying. And that comes down to preference, as I said before. Okay, so hopefully this has been of some help. When we get to the mids test, then we'll really get to figure out how these two headphones perform. We'll be able to talk about soundstage, we'll be able to talk about detail retrieval. But for bass, they're practically the same. Hopefully you all have a wonderful end of your work week and a fantastic beginning to your weekend. I hope all of you take care, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks.